I will now call this meeting to order. All trustees are present. Welcome. This meeting is being webcast live and recorded. The recording or webcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion to adopt the special board meeting agenda? I move. I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call Valerie. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy. Abby. And I. Do you have any public comment? Board workshop, review the school services in California report.
Okay, good evening, Board President De La Fuente, members of the board, staff. We have with us tonight Dr. Sarah Neiman coming from School Services to provide the reports on what you have requested. So I want to thank you for your patience as well as digging into the reports themselves. Tonight really about her giving you the update on what you had asked for, and so it's a workshop setting, and I know she'll provide some parameters, so I won't steal her thunder on those things, but really just, it's for us to have this setting to be able to have conversation, for you to have conversation around what you hear and ask questions. You have instruments in front of you like highlighters and pens and whatnot that you can write your information down, questions that you have. And then again, we'll wrap up at the end with just, final closing of the reports. Okay, so there's no action tonight, it's just all just reporting conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Board President, Board Superintendent Pachita, staff. It's nice to see you on and the community that's watching. As the superintendent shared, this is a board study session, so this is an opportunity for us to converse. It's my favorite way to have this type of information relayed, because I have a lot to go through, and you can stop me at any time, and we can have open dialogue. You can ask questions. I can go deeper into anything rather than waiting at the end and then coming up with your questions. So please feel free. This is a conversation for you, right? To provide you clarity. I'm just here to tell the story. So a little bit about me. I do come from School Services of California. Prior to that, though, I was an assistant superintendent of HR in Southern California for about 5.5 years. Prior to that, I was the chief of HR for LA County Office of Education. So I had 81 school districts under my oversight. So I've done a lot of work with school districts, large and small. I was telling your superintendent that I started my teaching career in a district very similar to this. One high school, everyone in the community came out for the football game. Everyone knew everyone, and I currently live in a community that's like this. My kids go to a 712 one high school, junior high campus. It's very small. And so the dynamics that come into play with small districts, small community districts, I totally understand and I love. I chose to live there. So that's just a little bit about me. At School Services, we do this work a lot. So we have a good benchmark for what best practices, industry standards might be. We also have a lot of data at our hands. So we're able to pull data from other school districts and to go deeper into how you compare to other school districts. So when we look at the purpose of this report, it really was to analyze the organizational structure of the district office to see if it was efficient. Is the structure set up in a way that's really maximizing the potential that you all have to serve students? We looked at the business services office, ed services, special services and health services, human resources, and technology. There was also a second part of the report, and that's kind of at the second half of the report, where we did a little bit deeper dive into the operating of the human resources department. Okay, so I'm going to start first with the organizational review of the whole district, and then we'll go deeper into HR. So when I get to the HR section, and you're going to say, where's the recruitment? That's coming, I promise. There's many slides in there for that. Okay. We talked to a lot of staff. One of the fun things about talking to all the staff is we found that so many of them were students of Corcoran. So, more than half of the people we talked to had been a student in the district and now work in the district. And I think that that is very cool. We looked at all the documents that were provided. We do a deep data request. I mean, we ask for like anything you've ever produced, any workflow you might have, any procedural manual. We look at the website, we look at org charts, we look at any standardized letters that might go out for your department in an area that we're focusing on. So we look at all of those documents and we look at the productivity of those departments. So while we're talking to the people and we're looking at how they're functioning within that department, we're not here to analyze if that person is effective. We're here to analyze if the structure is effective, if the procedures are effective. So that's really what the focus of this report will be on. I was sharing with Gina here a little bit ago that, there's always feedback that people have. There's ideas, criticisms, or areas where people feel like things could get better. But what we heard over and over again is that people really like to work here. So while they gave feedback, while they were hopeful under new leadership that things might get better and these areas of concern might improve, there was not a feeling of discontent or that, an idea that they didn't like it here. They actually really loved it here. And so while every district can talk about ways they can improve organization, not every district can say the people love to work here, right? And that was really cool. As a matter of fact, we said to the individuals, man, something is in the water in Corcoran, everyone is so happy. And they're not close to your resources and there's nothing around and you share an ambulance with the prison and we want to come visit this place, right? And just because the love of the community was really, really evident. And so what you're gonna see in the report is a lot of feedback of things you need to change. What you don't see is all that praise and kind of loyalty and dedication. And so I want to make sure that I express that because really your biggest attribute is going to be the retainment of the staff, right? It's a tricky thing to recruit in this area. So keeping your staff retained and happy is really important. So we look at, again, the effectiveness and efficiency of the organization. We include recommendations to implement, either changes in the admin structure or the organizational structure. We, at school services, we don't typically recommend adding a lot of staff because we know that there is a fiscal component to that. This is the highest number of staff we recommended in a report to add. And as we go through it, we'll talk about why it's really critical in each department. Again, these are recommendations. The board can have discussions about it and say, maybe we're gonna do all of it, or we're gonna do some of it, we're gonna tier it, we're gonna do none of it, right? But just based on the comparables and based on where we see is your operating deficiencies, we make these recommendations. We don't make them lightly because we know that there's a cost to your school district. We look at ways to coordinate admin functions and kind of how to realign district office structures and assign work duty a little bit more appropriately. Again, it's not that it's not working necessarily, but there's a much more efficient way in which we could organize some of these departments. And so we'll talk about that. And you might see something and want to ask about it, that's okay. That's what I love about this. So you are not alone in California, in that you are in declining enrollment, about 4% since 2018-19. I don't have to tell you this, right? But every student that declines, it counts in terms of your budget. And districts don't always then reduce in line with the student reductions, right? And so we take a look at your enrollment trends to see if this means that you need to adjust your staffing in any way. Again, at the district office, you are very understaffed. And so we're not recommending any cuts at this point. We're recommending that you really look at whether or not you have the capacity to add. But this is an important thing to track as it helps you predict enrollment trends moving forward and plan for your FYP. Multi-year projections. Sorry, if I speak in an acronym that you you don't know, or you want me to say, so for the community, just let me know. So we looked at 5 other districts that are like in nature, right? So we look at size, we look at UVP count, and you'll see in the chart, we added the academic data for you. We didn't use the academic data in our comparisons because there's so many factors that can go into the academic data, but just to give you an idea of where these districts are. With 8 schools, you are one of the highest with Tulare, but your enrollment is not the highest. So we look at, our districts that are defined as small districts and with similar UVPs. So we're not looking at districts like La Piñata or Azusa that are very wealthy and small. We're looking at districts that have similar UVP because that is more of an apples to apples comparison. I want to draw your attention to the first blue rank on here. Now, this is a lot of numbers on a chart. Okay, so basically what this says is if you look at every district that we compared you to, the number of individuals who are assigned to that department, that's FTE, full-time equivalent. So for instance, business services fiscal department has 6.50 FTE, 6.5 staff. Okay, and you can see across the board where the rest of the districts fall. Your total FTE then for your district is 44.72. Are you with me? Okay, let me know if I need to slow down. With your FTE to enrollment rank, that means the number of staff you have to support your students is 71.58. Okay. Which puts you ranked number 6 out of 6. So for the number of students you have the least amount of staff to support at the district. Okay. The scope of our report did not cover site-based personnel because you do have some really robust site-based programs. We're really looking at the operating functions of this district office to support the functions of these 8 school sites. So if you were to look at the scope, you would see Delhi has almost 1 to 30 more than you, right? And you can kind of go across the board. You're at 71.58, 51 to 68, 40, 46, 54. Okay, so this, even when we add the staff that we do, the recommendations that you'll see in the full report, it puts you in a rank of 5 of 6. We're not adding, we're not getting you to the Delhi status, right? But we're trying to get you into a place where you can operate more efficiently. So let's take a look at the different departments. We're going to start with the budget and finance. This is more business services, right? This is the operational side of the business services department. In terms of the different areas, fiscal services, the district is ranked 4 out of 6 in enrollments FTE. Food services 3 of 6, and then maintenance 4 of 6. So in the bottom half in every area in business services. Give you a second to look at the chart. So do we want to be 1 of 6 or 6 of 6? What is the? This is really a conversation for the board because the board's going to have to make priorities. You're probably not going to be able to be 1 of 6 in every area, right? And so where are your highest needs? And or is it the goal to try to be in the top third for every area? This is something that you need to take a look at, cost out, work with your finance person, your branding finance person, and decide, what are our priorities and what can we afford, right? Just because somebody is 1 of 6 doesn't mean that they're operating super efficiently either, right? We're just looking at the staffing allotment provided in order for the district to do the service. Business office is overseen by the CBO. And the CBO has a really broad oversight of surgery. Okay. Not included in this initial part is HR, right? The CBO technically right now has oversight of HR. You'll see in the report recommendations are made to take that out. A huge reason for that is because with the scope of management that the business office has, the CBO has, one, there isn't really the capacity to add HR, but two, HR and the business office have so much overlap that there needs to be a check and balance between the two. So when you have one department, one person, one lead person, determining who gets paid, what gets paid, how they get paid, then verifying that payment, we have some problems, right? We like to have a check and balance to have HR a part of the business. It's best practice. It allows for some that really check and balance and liability prevention for the district. And so we pulled HR out. We're really just focusing on those three key areas of business at this point. So again, the scope is really, really large for the CBO, and there's minimal management staffing supporting the fiscal services department, which is creating a need for that CBO to kind of work way below the level of his or her position, her position. In the same way that if you had a principal who had to be in a classroom every day teaching, that principal is unable to lead the school, right? Unable to deal with the larger aspects of, excuse me, managing a site, visioning, leading instruction. When you have a CBO who's also having to do the technical work, then that person is not able to oversee all of the other areas that fall under the oversight of the CBO. So because the work in the business office is so technical and transactional, the leadership position, one right now has to have that knowledge, but two, doesn't have the time to lead. So we have some vacancies in some key leadership positions, and we're going to talk about how we think we should structure some of that. We think that we should reconfigure that department to include the director of fiscal services, which would be a management position, and a fiscal manager, which is a supervisory. So the fiscal manager is overseeing the day-to-day transactions within. Okay, the director of fiscal is really kind of overseeing the budget and maybe purchasing, procurement, any of those types of larger areas. And then you have the CBO, who's again responsible for this and transportation and technology and the food services, right? So the CBO position can't really be managing so hands-on in this one area. That's going to fall on the director of the school services. We recommend that you add a technical position to the business office to streamline support for payroll and fiscal services. So you have a position that's split right now, HR and business, so 50-50. Again, having somebody who works at both departments is problematic because of the check and balance. So we would recommend that the person that's currently assigned to HR and business be moved to the business office full time. And that person can support the payroll office and fiscal. And then if you have the ability to fund the technical position, we would recommend that you do so. Again, you'll have to think about priorities, right? And which ones you can afford and what will come first if you can afford it. It is a long process. I have done this with other districts where we have met again with boards and said, okay, now that you have all this information, how do we begin to prioritize what comes next? And it involves work with cabinet and both board, and it involves a lot of conversations with unions because you may be creating positions that didn't exist, right? And so it does take time. I wish I could wave my magic wand that would make all of this happen for you. But technical analytical position in the business services department, like a budget analyst, would really help that department have the support that they need to be successful. This is like the fastest board study session. These are no questions yet. Let's look at the business services and operations. So this is food services and transportation and maintenance. You have one management level position in MLT, right? And then so you have the director of food services and the director of transportation and maintenance provide oversight for the respective departments. This is not a surprise, this is not a unique thing to corporate. Food services operations are impacted by your ability to recruit and have subs. You are not alone. This is a area of challenge for districts up and down state. When they change the fast food wage, you know, I don't know that districts lost a lot of people to go work in the fast food industry, but the minimum wage for fast food workers is higher than what some districts are paying their employees in terms of wage for food services workers. When we get into the areas where we're talking about recruitment, you know, something like food services is going to be a focus, right? Because you have to be creative. As I said, so many of your employees come from corporate, right? And so how do you tap into every resource you possibly can to find food service workers? But the operations here are a struggle because it is hard to recruit and because you don't have a team candidate for subs. You don't staff a district management position for transportation. So the MOT director is spread thin. Maintenance is so different from transportation, and your transportation is a bit of a struggle as well, and requires somebody that can really spend some time leading that group. And then you have high custodial needs. Again, it was reported there are often times where there's no supporter coverage during the night shift for classrooms, and this results in classrooms not being clean. These are just the key findings, right? We'll talk about the recommendations. Again, this is not a corporate only issue. In the district that I was just in, I mean, I was recruiting up and down trying to find custodians. We ended up starting a custodial strand at the adult school because we were trying to tap into the community in a different way, right? Where they got a certificate and they got work in sub while they got it, all the stuff. But the custodial needs are high here, and it also tends to be, in some cases, an area where we don't have subs, right? So again, being proactive with recruitment is really important. So in order to address that, we recommend that you take a look at the substructure, sub-compensation structure, determine if it is competitive, possibly even your wages, right, for the classified side. If you can consider streamlining the substitute pay structure to encourage classified substitutes to work in various classifications, right? So is there any sort of incentive for somebody to be enrolled in being an instructional aide or a food service person and a custodian and a bus driver? Is there any sort of incentive for working a certain birthdays, you know, things like this where you might have to get a little bit creative, right? So we would encourage you to start looking at, are we competitive, and are there things that we can do to make it more appealing to want to sub? We have any pathways for your employees or your sub employees to get permanent jobs in the district? Any sort of training program that a classified sub might take, or maybe they meet the requirement to sub, but they don't meet the requirement to be a full-time employee. What is that requirement? Is it something that can be, is there a program that could be put in place to support that, right? So if they sub, is there a place for them to get their high school diploma or GED that you can have a partnership with them so they'd be qualified to have a full-time job, right? Just things like that. You are not alone. We have been in an era of kind of passive recruitment in education for a really long time. And the time you used to post a job and hundreds of people would apply and you would have to wean them out. And now we're, you know, begging everyone we know, do you have a brother? Do you have a sister who wants to come work for us, right? we have to be much more creative and proactive and provide pathways into the district. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to recruitment. It's also determined that if you can add a director of transportation, that would be beneficial to the district. It would be a management level position. I'm sorry, the director of maintenance and operations. So you would split the two. This would allow me to really focus on grounds, custodial, and all the journey level positions that you have. And then you would have the transportation person there. HR. Now, HR is interesting because HR is, it is in theory a department, but it's not really structured in a way that makes it a department. It's very, very small. Even for the amount of students and faculty and staff that you have. You have currently assigned the student safety coordinator or that safety position into HR. That person was taken out of this calculation because that person doesn't really do anything with HR. So it's an FTE assigned to HR, but they have no HR function. That person only does safety. And so it's the same as like sometimes districts have the front office receptionist as an HR FTE, as an HR employee. But the receptionist doesn't do any work for HR. So we can't really count them as a body for HR, right? So there's minimal staffing here to support the HR functions. You provided 3 to support the HR department, which is 4 out of 6. You have the 1 manager responsible for managing the department. You have a vacant specialist. Is it still vacant?
It's not one listed. As far as
I've never heard of that position.
It would be in your position control report then probably.
Yeah.
So,
Some of the, I guess, right, so some of the, as we're doing this work, we're looking at position control. And part of it is that we need to work on that as well, because there's things in there that might have been there for a long time, but no one's ever, touched that, so. And that's part of the phenomenon from this,
Yeah.
what we're seeing.
position,
So was that a budgeted position?
well, so that is part of the question that when you go to reconcile position control. Position control management and reconciliation is an HR and business function, right? Again, another reason why those departments are split. And so one of the questions that we'll have to ask as we go through position control and budget is, okay, we have all these vacancies. Are they accounted for in our budget? Or are they not? And if they are not, then they need to be taken out and kind of reduced at the end of the year. You end them, right? You lay them off, lay off a vacant position. Reduce the services of a vacant position. If they are budgeted, then it needs to be taken out of the budget as the budget moves forward, right? Because you have the budget cycle and they're currently in there and it would have for the whole year, right? A salary assigned to those people. And then as you go to do your next budget cycle, those 3 months or 4 months should be taken out, right? And reduced. Again, this district didn't need to decide with each vacant position. Are we filling it or are we not filling it? And if we're not filling it, it needs to go up for reduction because then it falls out of the budget. Right? Cleaning up position control is not an easy task, right? And again, it is the responsibility of both departments to do so. And then you have this part-time position that's assigned to HR and business, which is shared with business services, but it's not really providing equitable support to HR, which is why we moved that position over to business. Now, if you're saying that this HR specialist that's vacant in the position control report is not really part of the staff, then you have only 2 staff in the department, okay, which would drop your rank even more. So when we look at the staffing allocation assigned to HR, it's really that the HR manager is the only functioning position that's fully dedicated to HR. HR is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of technical work, it's a lot of transactional work. And to only have one person assigned to that work causes a lot of the issues that we see. Now, there are some procedural and some, efficiencies that can be streamlined, but even the most efficient one person would struggle to do the job of a whole HR department. It's a really critical concern for us, and we think that you should prioritize it, right? Again, it's just our recommendation. You can say, we love HR the way it is, let's move on to a different department. But when we look at an area of high need, the HR department is one of them. Again, position control, leaves, recruitment, onboarding, the inefficient HR department team that people don't get paid on time, right? It's huge impact on payroll. There's so many things that come into play in an HR department. And you have one person dedicated to doing that, one full-time person. So the current oversight structure in the HR department is not functioning, right? It doesn't provide the level of supervision necessary to operate the district. We heard over and over again from the interviews that we conducted that they feel like the staff in HR work hard, but it's not enough staff. They're too busy, right? They're too busy, they're overworked. And the interviews that we conducted, the staff felt like they just needed more people. Okay. I want to emphasize, right, just like your question, should we strive to be number 1 or number 3? Just because we add more staff doesn't mean it's going to fix all your problems, right? There are functional and organizational recommendations we'll make to the HR department, which will help streamline the work. So you could have, 7 people for your small district, but if they're not, you give those systems in place, it's not gonna fix the problem, right? We're not recommending 7, don't worry. But we are recommending that you fill the vacant position and add one. Now, this vacant position sounds like a surprise to you, but ultimately we would like to see the manager and then 2 support staff, right? That's a bare minimum. Think about all the subs, right? I mean, there's a lot of work in HR. And again, you have the opposite problem as a lot of districts. A lot of districts, when they have issues, they throw staff at a problem, right? Sometimes we go into a district and we're like, you are so overstaffed. Like, oh, but we couldn't get this done, and we couldn't get this done, and they throw people at the problem. You do need to throw some people at the problem, but then you also need to address what's causing those problems, right? So consider reorganizing the HR department to align the duties, create some role clarity and purpose among staff, and increase the integration. We think that this HR person should be elevated to a director position. It's pretty rare to not have a position that's at that level. We're not saying that you should add a director, we're saying that the manager should be converted to a director position. Having a director level position provides that person the ability to have some initiative and some oversight that HR manager wouldn't. And so for your size district, we recommend a director. We think the district should staff an assistant, administrative assistant, and then fill the position that is vacant. That would be the analyst or the specialist in HR. With that, you would have you'd have your director, you'd have a specialist, this person would be doing like the credentials and the hiring and the onboarding and the leaves. And then you'd have that technical position that could be supporting all of the other components of HR. Ed services, I mean, I think I rewrote all of the ed services department. So, ed services, now I'm an HR girl, but I was a teacher and a principal, and so I love instruction. Ed services is really the focus, right? Is student outcomes, student learning, right? That's why we're all here. So you're here, we care about the outcomes for our kids. And so to me, educational services is a priority. It is why your high school scores so well, right? It's the vibe that people have when they are on campuses, the love that they have for their schools is why they come back and work for corporate, right? We want to produce students who can be successful. The current organizational structure of the educational services department is really fractured when it comes to student outcomes. It does not have the staff in place to support. And when I get to the staffing chart, you'll see. To me, this is another key priority. It doesn't have the management staff, and it also does not have the clerical staff. I am surprised at the lack of clerical support throughout the district. You have a lot of managers who are doing the clerical daily tasks that have to happen in an office. It really, again, think about that principal that has to teach every day. It takes them away from the ability to plan professional development, work on the instructional outcomes for kids, create visioning, work with the coaches, all of the things that you would want the assistant superintendent of education services to do. And the other educational leaders in the departments, they're really hands-on with also creating all of the critical documents for the, right? So you'll see a recommendation in here to admin staff and clerical staff to support departments. And then there's a reporting structure that's really fractured in educational services, and it contributes somewhat to the communication breakdown. So one of the things that I heard in interviews is, well, if we call this department about special ed, we get this. I'm using special ed as an example. We get this answer. If we call this department about special ed, we get this answer. And if we call this other person, it's another answer, right? And that's because there's not a broad oversight for, again, student outcomes. And so when you look at the big report, you see a reorganization of educational services. There's a brand new organizational chart in the big report, which shows how we realign the services that you already have, plus a few extra personnel, right? So that there's a more centralized approach to the educational services department.
I agree with that. That needs to be more streamlined across the board, especially referencing to special needs. From one school, it's called RSP, and now you go to the high school and it's called something different. And then if they're in special needs classes, they don't understand why their classrooms change, which can be very detrimental to that child.
So take a look at the staffing here for a second. You have in here like administrative staff, right? And one of the administrative staff is the director of categorical programs, right? This person's job is a narrow focus. Again, it's like the safety person sitting in HR. Okay, this person, categorical programs does belong in educational services, but this person is not really focused on the educational services umbrella, right? They have their own hefty amount of work. Department staff and then clerical staff. You're the only district without clerical support for the department. Okay. Overall, your staffing is ranked number 6. But I'd like you to take a look at just how drastic that is. 640 to 1. Or 1 to 640. One employee for every 640 students versus the next lowest is 347. Right. So it's recommended that you centralize that sort of oversight to the director of, or the assistant of ed services, and then include, think about adding a director of curriculum and instruction. You have right now site principals, and I think maybe you've started to phase this over, but site principals were assigned to the superintendent. They really should belong to educational services. All of your instructional coaches, your EL coaches, your technology coaches, all of the coaches that you have, I mean, a lot, have a really robust instructional model at schools. But they need centralized guidance, right? They need one department giving them direction. And they should move under ed services. So if you look in that organizational chart in the report, you'll see that all of the coaches are under what is proposed to be the director of curriculum instruction, which reports directly to the assistant superintendent of ed services. And then the principals report directly to the assistant superintendent. That way, all of the instructional leaders in your district are getting the same information. Okay. You'll also see in that organizational chart, a recommendation to move the Department of Special Services and Health Services under Educational Services. Special Services is, and I'll talk about that department separately, but Special Services is geared for, it's their goal or their role to provide better educational outcomes for students. They just target a certain population of students. But when you have then one branch targeting in this way and educational services targeting in this way, you're really kind of separating the learning outcomes from kids. The guidance should be under the vision of all of ed services, and then special ed with support under that umbrella, right? And so it streamlines the professional development. It streamlines again any sort of programs that you adopt as a school district, right? So educational services decides what programs, and special ed figures out, is there any adaptations we need for our students, right? So that we can support this bigger vision. Let's talk about special services and health services. Nobody wants to stay here until 8. Nobody wants to stay here until 8:30 with me, huh? Okay. All right. So special services and health services plays a really crucial role, right? It works with students with disabilities. You also in that department house kind of mental health. There's a lot of like the 504 work, the health services, but the delineation of duties is kind of unclear when you talk to people. So you have the director of health services who seems to and sounds like the go-to for most people at the school site. When you talk to people, and again, we talk to a lot of people, they feel like she reports to the director of special services. Right, but in reality, they are two tandem positions, right? There's a director of special services and a director of health services.
It's talk about Heather.
Yeah.
It's,
She is not a director. She is a health services coordinator
Coordinator.
who is. Under.
Okay. So when the department has needs like 504 planning meetings, SST meetings, IEPs, there are a lot of times where both of those individuals attend those meetings. Right. And the work that the director of special services does is really work that is primarily special ed. Except that she also does 504s and she does SSTs. So people think that the 504s and SSTs are the gateways into special ed. That's not the case. 504s and SSTs are a function of all students, right? Not special ed. Health services is a function of all students. Mental health care is a function of all students. So when you have it so closely intertwined, people feel like the health services, the 504s, all of these things are really geared for special ed. The individual, so the department is spread really thin in terms of the needs and the mandates for special ed and mental health and wellness. You have a really unique area here in that you are not close to services, right? You cannot go to a hospital. It's 30 miles, is that accurate? Counseling services, a lot of families would have to drive. You have some student safety issue that pops up sometimes, right? And, the staff that you have in place, or at least the delineation duties of the way you have it, it's not enough to support the work that needs to happen. It's spread really thin. What we heard, as I mentioned earlier, is that some individuals feel like the staff in special services and health services are not aligned with educational services. Okay, and so again, bringing that under the umbrella of that department would help. And much like the other departments, because the staff is so thin, spread so thin, they are called to work down. Right? There's nothing wrong with working down. I'm not saying that it's a hierarchy where they, but when you're supposed to be leading a special ed department and you're in IEPs all day long, or when you have to work on the compliance reports or making sure that the district is legally compliant, you can't because you are managing the daily tasks of a special ed case carrier, then it really harms the operations of that department. So, you've got the special education, you've got the wellness, and they are spread very thin. Again, they are attending like every meeting, all of these SSDs, all of these reports, all of these IEPs. The IEPs really should be site based. The principals or the AP should be leading that. And there's some training that needs to go along with that. I think that's mentioned in the report. But there is a large compliance piece in special ed, and as we know, it's very costly. Right? And so there is a recommendation here. I'll get to a little bit later about some personnel needs for special ed. So in terms of ranking, the district is 5 of 6. This is a little bit tricky because not every district groups them together. Special services and health services. Many districts call health services student services, right? You might hear this from student services instead, special ed and student services. For clarity, we recommend you do that as well. It really helps define the oversight for those individuals in that department. Okay, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But you can see, your administrative staff is high, but that's because you have like some quotes. This is not your admin staff, okay? You, as a district, outsource a lot of your specialized services for students to the county office, right? And so you don't have as many staff to supervise. That might be like an AP teacher or SLPs, you're probably contracted out with the county. And so it's kind of hard to track these numbers because, they might have a different configuration in the other districts. So we recommend that you split this department, that you retitle the Director of Special Services into a Director of Special Education. Okay, really put the focus on that and then take those general education tasks like 504s and SSTs off of her plate, right? Those general education tasks would go to, you said that she's a coordinator now, right? We recommend you elevate her to a Director of Student Services. And that person can then have 504s, SSTs, all the mental health, well-being, and the safety that was in HR. That's kind of like a whole package, right, for student services. They're looking at suspensions, expulsions, attendance, student safety. They're working with the police departments. When there's a crisis on the campus, they're coordinating mental health services. That's what a student services department does, right? Special ed department is focusing on the instructional goals for the kids and accommodations and services and a lot of legal compliance stuff, right? they should be clearly delineated. When you kind of group them all as a Department of Special Ed and Health Services, it becomes confusing. So you see that as a recommendation. We also think that under the Director of Special Education, that you should add a management position. It can also be a certificated position, but it should be a certificated management position. Our recommendation is certificated management position of a program specialist. Because that person can then sit in an IEPs, that person as the administrator, that person can supervise and direct staff. That person would be responsible for a lot of the compliance issues that come up in special ed. You need to have a position that is at a high enough level that they have the authority to do that work, right? So if you were to pull out job descriptions from other districts and you pull the program specialists, you might see some that are certificated, you might see some that are certificated management. Because your department is so small, it really needs to be a management position, certificated management position. Because that allows them to do the necessary work in that department. And then again, I talked about moving the safety over to special services. To the Director of Student Services. It only works if you create the Director of Student Services. And that was a lot.
That makes a lot of sense.
How about a much easier department? Technology. Okay, this was a really easy department. We all know what technology does, it keeps the instruction going for our students and our staff, right? Make sure things work. Nothing is worse than being a teacher, going to teach your lesson, turning on a computer and something's not working or the bulb's out or whatever. I will say that this department, I interviewed your outgoing, recently retired director. I think he was 2 days away from retirement, he had a button on. A big smile on his face. I'm like, you are happy. He's like, I'm retiring. But I'll tell you that the department's really proud of the systems that they have in place. They have a help desk system. The feedback we got, we interviewed stakeholders of the department, means we talked to people who use technology, right? Principals, we talked to different individuals. And they said the response from the technology department is really good, right? They're really responsive. I mean, you have tech people, help desk people, and then you have kind of tech coaches at the schools. I mean, you have support. And so there's really positive feedback there. What makes it unique is that you use all these Apple products. And I'm an Apple person, I love Apple products. I hate the computer that I have for work. But what that means for you is that you outsource your repairs. And you know, that is a choice you make, and it's something that should be reevaluated on a kind of regular, maybe every other year basis. How much is it costing you to outsource these things rather than hiring an Apple specialist, right? The answer may be it's cheaper to outsource, right? Because when you break a PC, it's like a Lego, you replace the part, but an Apple, they're special. And they're harder. I will say that the managers in this department are working managers. Also, they answer help desk tickets, and they do the clerical support for the department. So any sort of board reports, any sort of forms that are filled out for ordering, any sort of invoices, again, there's no clerical support for them. It works with the managers that are in place, but I wouldn't say that it's the best structure for a functioning department. The technology department currently reports to the superintendent. It is the superintendent's job envisioning for the whole district, right? And so we don't need him to be hands-on or in the nitty-gritty of directing the work of the technology department. We reassign that to the CBO, Assistant Superintendent of Business. That's very common, that technology falls under the business office. And so you'll see that recommendation. The day-to-day direction, and evaluation supervision of that employee should really fall under the CEO. They have a ticket system, like I said, it works. Our recommendation is just review it. if when you're reviewing your ticket system, 90% of the tickets can be resolved by an employee, and you're just kind of outsourcing 10%, then I think that outsourcing is really okay, right? But if you have all of these staff responding to a need on the campus for technology, but then most of them can't be fixed in-house and they, 90% can be outsourced, then you may want to look at, is this really working, right? Should we look at a specialized technology position that, can work on Mac computers or something like that? You'll have to pardon the last bullet. I think that is there in error, so. Because that should not be there. In terms of technology, you rank 3 of 6.
And it's more for the superintendent?
Yeah.
I thought at one time we sent someone to Apple to be certified to repair our computers. Could you check on that, please?
Yeah, we definitely can. And I know that with Adam on board, he actually has reached out to Apple. So we could go visit them at some
But
point.
I thought we did it in the previous.
Yeah, he'll check.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll definitely check to see.
Yeah, we can provide some.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I just said that people were very happy with technology, and from my understanding, they send out a shipment maybe once a month, depending on what is broken. But as somebody who has dropped her MacBook and broken her screen and had to, give it out to somebody else, I get it, I totally get it. And I love those products, but just looking at the efficiency of it and is there another way to do that? So you rank 3 of 6 in the comparative group for technology. Again, you have a good amount of staff. I would say that anyone in the technology department would advocate, and anyone at schools, I would say, yes, we could use more technology people, right? But in terms of your district and the priorities and where all the other staff that you need, technology right now is not a huge priority because you have really efficient systems and really strong people in that department. They care about customer service. Your managers roll their hands up or roll their sleeves up and they do the work. I do think that they need some sort of clerical support. Doesn't have to be full-time, right? This could be a split position, but it really is not time best spent for the director of technology or the position below that. I can't think of the title. Manager of technology to be spending the time doing clerical stuff when because he is a working manager, he could be out supporting students and technology. Teachers. So you have a lot of information, right? A lot of recommendations here. I've come and broken your piggy bank, and I totally get that, right? It's not our intention. Again, I did this report with a colleague and we had to go back and forth and are we really recommending this many staff? But again, if you take a look at, I don't think it ended being 7 FTE, it still keeps you 5th out of 6th, right? It's not, we are not overstaffing your district. So establishing your organizational structure is a critical first step. When you put those pieces in play, it's going to allow you to create systems that can be more streamlined and make more sense to people. They should know who to go to. The communication should be better because it's coming from one common voice, right? That's then carried out through whatever channels. When you do your implementation, you should talk about workload transitions, reallocating that work. And how to develop procedures and protocols as part of that. So if somebody wants to request something, or they have a student who needs X, Y, and Z, what are those protocols? Are they written? Does anyone know what they are? And are they followed, right? All of these things, these like little pieces come into play when you have those structures in place. So we always say, you think about every department has hundreds of functions. But there are some that are always hot button issues for staff, right? Man, I don't know how to get my leave approved or my credits accounted for, or I don't know how to request this information. I don't know what to do. Figure out what those hot button items are and start there, okay? As educational services, what are you hearing the most about from staff? What do you need the help with? Create that procedure, share it with the whole department. From categorical programs to director of student services to director of special ed, right? Every director of group instruction, and then filter it down so that everyone knows what those procedures are and then share. Again, it's not a small task, it doesn't happen overnight, but that's where you pick the critical ones first and you expand from there. Right off the bat, that's gonna help people feel like communication has improved. I wanna say this though, about communication. We always feel like we communicate well. I was in a district office attendance. I thought I communicated very well. I communicated a lot, emails, texts, and show up, and people would say, I never heard that before. Okay. I physically called my previous district to let them know that the state was not gonna allow people to do layoffs. I emailed the superintendent, and the CBO, and the HR, and I said, just so you know, FYI, it's not public. The state is not gonna let you do layoffs. So then they called me and said, hey, when can we schedule a board meeting because we want to do layoffs? And I said, hey, remember when I told you that the state said you can't do layoffs? I'm like, no, that's news to us. I'm like, So there is a reality of people who feel like they're not getting communicated with, and the other side is like, we are communicating. Are you opening your email? Are you doing X, Y, and Z? So there's a balance of that, but there's also a balance of, there's also the reality of, well, they do communicate, but the communication is different. Right, it's just different depending on where we go. I have never been in a district where people have said the communication here is amazing. I know where to go all the time, I know what's going on, it's never. It is gonna be in any report you ever write, somebody's gonna say something. What they did say is that since Superintendent Chan started, they have seen real attempts to improve communication. There was clear protocols for how to report an incident at the school site. They knew there were like text groups or there was something they were doing, that there was an effort being made. And so, you know, it takes a lot of consistent work to improve communication. But then once you have those systems in place, those players in place, right? So let's say that you do create a director of student services and a director of special services, special ed. Sorry, retitle special services, special ed. That needs to be communicated vertically and horizontally, right? That these are the new positions and this is what they do. And this is why you go to each of us, right? And then now these people report to the education services, right? The instructional coaches or the coaches that you have. They now report here, and this is why, right? And this is how, you know, how they're going to support instruction, all of that. You need to figure that out, you need to define it, overview, right? And then our other recommendation is that you need to evaluate staffing on a regular basis, right? Is your staff aligned with your priorities? Again, if I were to look at your educational services department or your HR department, I can say that HR and student outcomes are not a priority for the district. I know it's not the case, right? They're two really, really crucial areas. Just don't have the staff to really support the work. So use that. Look at your enrollment, right? Because if you're continuing to decline enrollment, you may have to make some cuts, but you do need to evaluate whether or not you have the appropriate staff to support the business. Before I go on to HR, any questions? I want some thoughts. This is a conversation.
I think for me, a personal thought is, how did we get this way? What happened? Did we review staffing levels at some times and we just decided this is no longer needed, so we cut it? Is that where we've been?
I think that was based on the specific recommendation. Wait for it.
But you're asking how did we get so lean?
Yes, how did we get so lean? Did we just reduce the staffing? Was it for budget purposes?
I don't know the history. Is someone who's been here longest that would know, did you have these positions in play?
With HR, did you have those other positions that we discussed ever? How long have you been doing this work?
9 years.
9 years. It's all.
And it was a year credit.
So the other districts that they're able to, because the budget is based on the enrollment, right? So most of them are pretty close to us. It's interesting to see how they can afford so many more entities. It's interesting.
I think part of that is the daily enrollment, 1, 2, what they pay. We're not looking at it, we're paying the teacher or the manager. And we're basing our staffing based on what we get. And if the enrollment is declining for the last 10 years, at 4%, which is gonna be for the next 4 years, or for the next 10 years. It's gonna continue increasing 4% more, or is it gonna go up to 10%?
Yeah, I mean, the districts, you know, they look at enrollment trends and a lot of them use, you know, demographers and whatnot to get predictions. Every once in a while, right? What are the predictions for the next 5 years? Do you have a lot of people nearing baby age? Do you have new builds in the area that is gonna bring in families in a certain number of years? That type of thing. But the enrollment is crucial. I think, you know, when student enrollment declines, districts have to look at, you know, either cutting at the school sites or cutting at the district office, right? I would imagine that ultimately, maybe in the first recession in like 2008, back when it was really bad, maybe the district made some cuts at the district office, but I don't know. You have a lot of staff at those school sites, right? I don't know how that plays out, and I'm not saying go fire teachers, right? But you have to look at the staffing levels at both, right? To be fiscally responsible as a school board. Are we staffed closer to contract? Do we have staff? Do we have extra staff? Are these people all the services we're providing necessary? Yes, the answer might be yes, and that's fine, right? But then if that's a priority, then you have to take whatever's left in your pocket and say, okay, but this is also a priority, right? It's hard, it's not an easy fix. Yeah.
So based on your study, what you've given us, what's the total number of positions that in rosy peachy world of great finances would we be adding?
It's 7.
So,
Yeah, and there is a chart in your big report that lists each of them. Some are classified and some are certificated management, or classified management, management and classified.
So this review is specifically to district staffing, correct?
Yes,
Not sites.
right. We were not asked to look at sites. Are you trying to look at the page?
Yeah, it's right here. It's on page 13. Page 13, there's a table that gives you comprehensive list of what those positions are. Couple restructured, 3 restructured, some new. So you have them there.
I'll give you a second to read it. Any questions? Any more discussion? You guys, you can talk amongst yourselves too. It's the beauty of a board study session.
What does restructuring look like?
Are you talking about a certain position?
Or just, I see we have 2 or 3 here, so let's look at the director of HR, so it's just a title change?
So that one, yeah, it would be a title change to a level that she could provide direct oversight to 2 classified individuals, right? Restructuring, when we're looking at special ed and director of student services, those are also, the special ed is a restructure, right? On there. So that position is a title change. And then a clear delineation of duties to remove the general education services off of that desk. Right, to create more of a focus of special education and student services, wellness, safety, all of the things that we know and love about student services would go under that position. And then all of the IEP compliance, accommodations, services, all of that would go under special ed.
Those are the new positions, right?
Special ed is not new, it's retitled.
It's gonna be retitled, it's just gonna be a reorganization of the departments. Oh, okay.
Right. The director of student services is elevating the current coordinator. Okay, and adding additional oversight. Including student safety.
And then like they're moving transportation from the CPO.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so part of that as we look at that department as a whole, right, there's a lot of confusion and Dr. They, you know, kind of put that out there. Yeah, and even, but put that out there that even there's not a lot of clarity of goals, right? So you have like Maria, who is oversees wellness, you have Heather, who's a nurse, right? So I think we're talking more about Maria and that, you know, or something like that as being the student services side. She's was a vice principal at one point in time, that type of thing, right? So so that's kind of what.
Yeah, that person would support with student discipline, right, as student services would, right? Again, it comes out of that special ed kind of, because student discipline is not a special ed thing, it's an all student thing, right? So separated that out. If you PBIS, I know you have PBIS because I parked on the wrong campus. And was staring at PBS sign for how we behave in the quad. PBS can fall under student services. It can fall under director of instruction, but I typically see it in student services when student services fall under the direction of it.
So does the district have informational lists, like how do you know which stuff falls under which director? Do we have a listing of that? Do we follow it, or will we keep following it, the organization?
Yeah, so-
The organizational chart, what district, what falls under whose authority? Like you're just giving the examples, I like to know what we're supposed to be having versus what we currently have.
So in the big report, there are more in-depth recommendations.
Okay.
And the organizational chart. So if you were to look at it, like in the section that talks about special ed and student services. I list out areas of oversight that the director of special ed would have and the director of student services in the narrative, right? If the board were to move in that direction, then we always recommend creating a delineation of duties that go along with the org chart. So that it's really clear to people what areas of oversight people are responsible
I
for.
think I seen a chart earlier when I was looking at this at home where there's one and then for the second one, the recommendation here.
Yeah, page 9.
So this
There
is
you
the
go.
way it is, and this is what we would like to see. I couldn't see it.
Well, this is the way.
Tiny.
This is what we, yeah, okay, this is what we recommend, and if you go to the individual sections, you'll see, I think the areas, I think the boxes that are in light
A
blue
little bigger, yeah.
are new.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you
Okay.
can kind of see,
Okay, good, because I couldn't see.
yeah,
it.
it's a lot.
Okay, it is a lot.
Mhm.
Thank you though for this, it is a lot. It's a lot of information to take in, and it's definitely something that we need to look at because. As a matter of fact, I think we just had a meeting where we are throwing more duties onto HR. And so that's important for us to understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I mean. To have an HR department, I would say, again, minimally 3 people, right, for a district of 3,000 some change kids.
So,
You know,
I'm sorry, I know
Yeah.
this is probably a dumb question, but how does the amount of students relate to HR? Is that because of the staffing levels for the?
yeah, it's
Okay.
it's because of the number of staff,
Okay,
right, and if you were to think about it in terms of. There are districts who have the same number of staff or the same number of students and fewer school sites. You have more school sites. That means you need more custodians, more grounds, more food services, more site admin, more teachers, right? Because you have the same number of students spread out at multiple school sites. So you have a larger hiring need. Than, let's say, a district that has the same number of students and half the number of schools. The sub need is also higher when you have more schools, right? Because when you have fewer schools, there are more bodies on the campus to steal from, more classes to collapse, more creative ways to solve the problem. But when you have a small number of subs that are trying to resolve issues at 8 different school sites, it makes it harder. Does anyone need a recess before we go on to the next? Or question? Drinks? Good. So. Easiest sport ever. Pass out my gold stars. All right. Let's talk about HR. You take my presentation away?
No, he's gonna go, is that all in the same
There.
presentation?
It's on the same.
On the same slide.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I thought we were going to the PDF.
That's okay. Okay, let's start from the beginning. We'll do it all over again.
We'll get you there.
I'll test you and let's see what you guys picked up. Okay, you want to?
Sure.
Yeah. Keep going. Keep going. Okay.
There we go.
All right. So the second part of the ask was really around the HR operating functions, right? The essential tasks, review of hiring practices. Again, it's really hard to call this an HR department, but for the purpose of this report, it is an HR department. And we're going to take a look at some areas that we feel we can make some recommendations to streamline. We looked at an assessment of the existing HR policies and procedures and training practices. We looked at the district's recruitment, selection, and onboarding procedures. And we provided some standardized materials in the report as part of the appendix, right? So just some examples of things that can be used that are standardized practice. We share these protocols up and down the state and people modify them to fit their needs, right? But the idea is that it's a starting place. And then we know that the starting place is legally compliant, and then you can kind of tweak it to fit the needs of the program. So we gave you some resources for posting and timelines, reference checking, screening, and then interview questions and rating. And all of these are really important when it comes to talking about having a legally compliant, unbiased interview and recruitment process. And HR is my heart. That's where it's like the last 11 years. So there are a lot of things that impact a district's ability. I see that. Yeah. A district's ability to recruit. Geographic location. You have a unique geographic location. The compensation, school community that's served, and the operational practices. There are some things in here that are outside of your ability to change, right? Your community, geographic location is not something you can change. It's something that you need to use to your advantage, right? As I said, more than 50% of people we talk to have been students in program. And so you've got to really kind of play that out. Compensation, people don't. The number one reason people leave their jobs is not really money in the school district. It's really about feeling like they belong and commitment. And it's not like a lot of districts where they, other districts that are closely neighboring districts, if they're paying $7 more an hour and I can drive 15 minutes, I might go there. It's not necessarily the case here, right? People come and they're kind of locked in. And so you have that works to your advantage, but also to your disadvantage. Your recruitment profile is complicated. You have a great blessing in the fact that you have multi-generations of families that have worked here. But it can also present some challenges, right? And it calls into question sometimes the district's ability to hire without bias. And is there nepotism? I'll tell you, in every small school district, there are family people who are related to, you know, somebody's related to somebody else. The board's related to somebody, the superintendent's related to somebody, the principals, and that is the nature of it. I'm not saying you can't hire family, you can't hire community. What you need to make sure is that you have that legally defined process, right? So that's where we give you some tools to do that. So it is really difficult in your situation to ensure that the selection is free of personal associations. You guys know people, everyone in the community knows people. You know, if I worked in the area, the school district that I live in, I would know everyone. So it would be a challenge. But this significantly impacts the district's culture, and there has been, right, some questioning of the hiring process. Now, it's our understanding that, you know, there used to be kind of an informal approach, a lot of appointments were made. And then we kind of went all the way to the other side and had this like really formal process. And I'm gonna talk about why we need something a little bit middle for what you guys need. It can't be so rigid that we have barriers that, you know, barriers you keep people from applying. You can't be so formal that, you know, people can hire nobody. Right? You need to have a structure in place, and we need to make sure it's legally compliant, because that's what's gonna get you in trouble. So we're gonna talk about that. These are the observations, okay? The observations first, and then I'll talk about recommendations. Again, feel free to stop me at any time. I know that the recruitment analysis, the HR focus was the instigator, the catalyst for the board and the previous superintendent inviting school services in. And then we've since added the organizational review, so I understand that this is an area of interest for the board, right? So we can talk about that. So you face a significant difficulty in attracting fully qualified candidates on both sides, certificated and classified. You are not alone in California. There is a shortage of qualified individuals to do the work. Bus drivers, technology, teachers, a lot of site administrators or brand new site administrators. I mean, there's just a lack of qualified. So you are not alone. The current recruitment practices in the district are more passive than they are proactive. Again, not uncommon for school districts. We, as I said, have been able to post things on Edgeline and get a flurry of applicants. That no longer works for us, right? We, in school district, we have to be doing outreach. We have to be actively recruiting. We have to make partnerships with, you know, Chamber of Commerce, local job boards, local adult schools, community colleges, universities, any of these areas. When I was in Glendale, I advertised in a Community Orthodox church. They allowed me to put it in their bulletins, right? And that opened the door. And then I started to put it in every bulletin, church bulletin, that the houses would let me, because I was just trying to reach the community, right? I started using social media. I mean, you really have to change the way that you look at recruitment. It's really hard when you're one person managing the whole department. Right? It's not feasible for one person to do that and leaves and make sure people get paid and all the other things, right? And so when you look at the need to recruit, you need to be thinking about, okay, where can I go that's different than what I've already done? Who can I call? Who can I partner with? Are there training programs in the area? Are there opportunities that we have as a district to provide training programs? What can we do to make our location, our district marketable? and kind of making a whole recruitment plan. Again, not an easy thing to do, but our old practices of posting our individual don't work anymore. We get some, and we get mostly certificated management. But people who are attorney level trades folk, or people who might be in food services or structural aids or on that side, they don't even know about it. Right, so what are we doing to take that message out to them? Local papers, mailers, I mean. I was in district, I think it was in Tracy, so it's kind of similar in terms of just like location. In terms of being geographically isolated, and they had sent mailers out to everyone in certain zip codes, right? And these are the jobs we're looking for, this is how you apply. Another observation in employee selection, to address concerns involving management selection processes, we revised selection procedures have been established to ensure fair hiring practices are in place. This involves multiple panels in steps. Again, this 2-panel process that you have is very common, but we're seeing districts move away. We're seeing the technical and the community panels or the interpersonal panels merge into one. So that the panels can have a holistic view of what that candidate is offering. It also allows for a little bit more control over who sits on the panel and the training that they do, because they need to be trained, right? There's a section in this part of the report that talks about the importance of training for panel members, and hiring managers, and for training them on legally compliant interviews and confidentiality, right? The more people you invite to sit at the table, the more chances you have that they could be somebody who says something that they shouldn't, somebody who is not following the process that is laid out, somebody who is sharing information outside of that group that could damage the hiring process and really could set the district up for some sort of liability, right? So there's an area in the report that talks about the need for training. And because you can't train every single person, it's not an interview panel, right? But you are going to train your key union leaders and the union leaders at the school side, and you're going to train your hiring managers. You're going to have somebody in HR that's trained to support that work, and you're going to hold them accountable for that confidentiality and other client interview. Now, I have trained people at the wazoo on legally compliant interviews, and I've still had people say things that are ad hoc in an interview, right? And I use those specific examples when I do my interview training. Say, you know, guys, I think that you think I'm kidding when people say this stuff, but here are some examples of things you can't say. And all of these have happened to me within the last 6 months, right? And I go through it, and people are like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I would never say that. We know better. And then somebody says, right? And if that hiring manager or HR is not there to address it, then that comment floats out there, right? And then someone on that panel goes and shares that comment that's been said or whatnot, right? It's allowed to kind of grow. And so I still can't believe, and one day I'll write a book, the things that have happened on interview panels, okay? The importance of training and controlling that environment is so important. And then you have this employee onboarding and hiring process. Now, again, this is all falling on one individual right now, one primary individual in that department. We think that the onboarding process could be improved and streamlined to create a positive hiring experience. One of the easiest ways to do this is to create electronic workflows. New hire paperwork that can be integrated through a software platform. There are systems that do this. Districts all up and down the state are using systems to do this. Instead of handing paperwork out, like somebody has to come, they live 40 miles away, they have to come pick up the paperwork, they take it home, they fill it out, they bring it back in, or they mail it or whatever. It can all be done digitally, and then it sorts automatically. The onboarding process can be streamlined, probably using a system you already have, right? It might just be an add-on, or it might be a training that needs to happen so that your staff know how to use it. right? So that system could be done much, pretty easily probably. There are we don't see a majority of districts using paper anymore for onboarding. It's just kind of gone by the wayside, because then what you're managing is a bunch of paper versus, you know, we use technology for everything, and you have an amazing technology partner, so I'm sure they can help you. So let's talk about recruitment a little bit, or recruitment and onboarding. The question around recruitment procedures and hiring barriers is always a really interesting conversation, right? So there are a lot of aspects that go into hiring. There could be on your job description requirement that certain jobs require a certain level of education, or maybe an office manager requires 3 years of school office experience. Okay, these are just standard language in job descriptions. Is it necessary that a school office manager have been in a school, a secretary position for 3 years? Probably not. But back in the day, we put all of these barriers in place. We put all of these really high requirements in to weed people out, right? Our new reality in California is that we need to be inviting as many people as we can to interview. And let the interview process determine whether or not this person can do a job. Let the 6-month probation period for a classified determine if a person can do the job, right? But don't close the door for them before they're even able to apply. So having conversations around recruitment barriers. If you require people to apply online, right? Do you have a place for them to come to the district office to do that? They don't have a computer or internet. Things like this, right? Do you allow certain testing to be done in English or Spanish or any other language, or is it all of you done in English? Is there a reason why they have to take an academic English test for a custodial position? There are questions you have to ask yourself as a district when it comes to recruitment barriers. So expand your announcements regarding your job opportunities in any way you can, right? Where is it that your community goes to for information for jobs? What is it that they are subscribed to? Is there a radio station that you could use to reach another population? In Burbank, we use the Spanish TV station and the Spanish radio station and put out ads. We also had our tests translated into English. I'm sorry, into Spanish. They had to have conversational English, but they did not have to have academic English. But they needed to be able to converse in order for safety reasons, right? And so we modified the way that we were doing recruiting. So take a look at where you're posting your vacancies. Send newsletters tailored for the school communities regarding positions within the district. Designate an employee center in the district office and provide technology resources. You might have to go so far as to setting up office hours somewhere else. I went to the adult school, I spoke to all the classes, and I set up office hours in computer lab. And I said, okay, we can apply here. Anyone that wants to apply in computer lab, I'll have Armenian speakers and I'll have Spanish speakers, and I'll be there and we'll help you apply. We'll help you scan your documents in, right? Do you require letters of recommendation for an entry-level classified job? Do you? So this is a pretty big hiring barrier, right? You're probably not getting a bunch of bad letters of recommendation, right? But somebody who doesn't, they're asking their soccer coach, they're asking their neighbor, they're asking their pastor. Okay, for an entry-level classified position, right? One, it could deter them. But 2, it's not gonna mean anything to have their soccer coach write them a letter of rec, right? And 3, maybe they have 2 and they need 3, and so they get screened out if they don't have 3. These types of questions you can be asking yourself, right? And then look at hiring events. Job fairs, Do it at schools, use the PTAs, I mean, anything you can do. Attend job fairs, at the universities, there are virtual ones. There are ones out of state. I know districts have been successful in bringing in diverse candidates from out of state job fairs. Because they speak a language California, right? So just be creative. What we've done in the past doesn't work anymore. Your selection and hiring processes should be consistent with policies and your admin regs. You might not have even updated your policies or admin regs recently, but it would be something to review on kind of a regular basis. So you have a workflow in your district that talks about candidate screening, and it says that they'll be screened by I think it says HR or the hiring manager. Am I correct? Yeah, I'm picturing your little like pathway, right? It's like a board game. We think that you really should have the hiring managers be the screeners for competency, right? If I'm an HR tech and I am following the job description that says, okay, this person needs to have 3 years sitting, or, you know, as a technology person, and they need to have a high school diploma, and they need to have X, Y, and Z, right? And I'm looking at this resume, and it's a bunch of tech mumbo jumbo. I don't know if that mumbo jumbo meets this requirement, but he will. Right? He will. So when you're looking at the competency for experience, that really belongs in a specialized hiring manager's hands. HR can then screen for all of the other stuff, like, do you have the credential, do you have the driver's license, do you have whatever? But I'd ask you this. If they don't have the driver's license, or if they didn't submit 2 letters or 3 letters, or if they're missing a page of a transcript, are you screening them out for an incomplete application? Probably, and I'll tell you why, because we're all trained to do that. This person couldn't follow directions, or they didn't meet the timeline, they didn't fill out the application all the way, right? Instead of saying, hey Valerie, saw your application. I just want to let you know you didn't submit your driver's license. Can you please send it over, or in order to be hired, or you know, whatever, you have to do this. This outreach, right? The HR department right now doesn't have a manpower to do it. But in our circumstances now, with this hiring need, so we need to be doing, right? Again, we're not looking at ways to screen out everybody. We should be looking at ways to invite as many people as possible. So you're gonna modify that screening role. You're gonna provide some hiring, your hiring or training to your hiring managers so they know what to look for, right? And HR should oversee the activity and that compliance training to make sure that it's not discriminatory, right? You can even take off the names of the resumes and say, okay, here's everyone that applied. To go ahead and screen them based on what you see. The reference checks. You want to implement a thorough reference check. So when Danielle and I have been up and down the state, Danielle's my counterpart. She's about yay tall, so we're kind of funny together. And we typically do these presentations together, and we coordinate some outfit. We're a lot of fun. Now I'm on my own. So, but what I would say is we've been up and down the state saying to people, get rid of reference checks for these positions. Not reference checks, letters of recommendation. Get rid of letters of recommendation. Use reference checks. Okay, call people. And again, if it's like the stay-at-home mom that hasn't been at work in a long time, who's she gonna have you call, right? You have to determine at what point things are necessary. In your small knit community, you probably know her already. Somebody in the district knows her already, right? But you want to have a thorough, legally compliant reference checking process and form. And so we provide that for you. So that everyone's using the same form, all the hiring managers know how to use it, and all of them have to be filled out before you offer employment. Okay. So if you're requiring 3, then you get all 3 from the hiring manager, and then HR makes that offer. Your interview panels. We recommend that you eliminate the multiple panels. Consider integrating the technical and interpersonal for management. Interview panel should include the hiring manager, a member with job expertise, and the director's practice. So if you are hiring somebody in the fiscal department, there better be somebody with fiscal knowledge on that panel. And if you don't have somebody in the district, call one of your neighbors and get somebody. Okay? There should be somebody that knows, that can tell if it's, the answers are right. The HR department should work with the hiring manager to select and approve the hiring panels. And the hiring managers and panel members are provided with formal ongoing training on legally compliant hiring procedures, right? Again, these are the non-discriminatory practices. And then uphold the confidentiality process in the interviews.
What is your appropriate number of members?
Members, it really depends on the level of position. So when we do like an executive cabinet position, we typically have 9 or 10.
9 or 10?
If we are doing maybe if you're doing a principal, you may have a principal, like another principal, you may have the director. Or like the director, I would say principal, director, teachers union, classified union rep. You might have the school office manager there and somebody from HR. Because then if they go on to a second round, right, at that point, the hiring panels are making recommendations. Okay, especially for management. So if the hiring panel is making the recommendation to the superintendent, right, because his job is to hire the rest of the staff, right? Your job is to hire him. You hire and fire him. Not saying you fire him, you hire and fire him, and he is responsible for the rest of the staff. So then he would take the recommendation from that interview panel and make a final determination. You had a
Just had a quick clarification on the reference checks, the first bullet. Are you saying that hiring managers do the reference checks or HR? How's that work out in this?
Yeah, the hiring manager should do the reference checks and then provide them to HR. On that working, it says that either could, and I think that, if there was a desperate need, like somebody was out, I think HR could do that. But if it's not the principal, it could be the assistant principal, it should be the hiring manager, making those calls because they're the ones that are making that recommendation to HR to hire. Right? And so they do that work, they make the recommendation to HR because they follow the process, they fill out the form, and then HR can make that determination. This confidentiality, again, it's so important. Everything that happens in an interview, all of the documents that are provided in an interview and that are written on are part of a public records request. So at any time, somebody could request the ranking sheets. They could request through a CPRA, they could request panel notes, and all of this is stuff that I talked to them about before this, the interview. And the confidentiality is part of having a legally compliant interview process. So we included in the appendix a confidentiality agreement that you could have your individual sign. Talk to them about the importance of confidentiality. I always give them sentence frames when they walk out. All right, you're gonna walk out of here, you're gonna see your friends at the grocery store because this is the type of community we're in. When they ask you how did the interview go, here's what you can say. This is what you can say, right? And if somebody does not uphold that confidentiality in the interview, then they can be subject to discipline and they can be not invited back to sit on an interview. Right? Because that process is to be prevented.
I'm kind of confused here.
Yeah.
You said the interview packets are public information.
They can be part of a CPRA.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was confidential personnel matters.
No, because they're not hired. So, employment paperwork, once an employee is hired and it goes in their personnel file, that's confidential. But as part of the CPRA, interview documents could be, because let's say I'm a candidate of color and I'm not selected. Okay, and I want to say that the district doesn't like any candidates of color. They always rate them last. So I'm gonna request all of their ranking sheets for the last 25 interviews, right? And I'm going to go through it and I'm gonna say, okay, well, I don't know if this person is Canada color, but let's, maybe they're going on names, maybe they're going on, if they check the box on EdJoin that says, what the race is, whatever it might be. And they're gonna say, okay, like, these are the documents I'm gonna use. So the documents that are produced in HR as part of the interview process, screening process, all of that can be CPRA.
So what happens to the person that gets selected?
So once they complete the hiring packet, that hiring packet that has all of their confidential information, that goes in the personnel file. But everything that led up to them getting hired, right? The fact that they were selected number one, the fact that, I took notes and I wrote down all of the lovely things they said, that part can be secured.
But is that person still not considered an employee until the board approves that individual?
So there's two different documents here we're talking about, right? One would be the documents that are used for the hiring, to all the stuff leading up to the hiring, right? That part is part of the California Public Records Act, CPRA. Everything after that, I'm offering you this employment, this is the contract, this is, whatever, that goes in the personnel file. Okay. The employee, there are districts who do not allow employees to start until the board approves the personnel report. There are some districts that do that. There are some districts that allow employees to start and the board ratifies the personnel. Ratifies it with, they say we approved the start dates. That's a board decision. Okay. If you think about, sometimes it changes throughout the year, right? Maybe the board is only meeting once a month in the summer and there's huge hiring that needs to happen. Or maybe it's a Thanksgiving and there's only, or November, there's only one board meeting, but you've been waiting on this person to start and these kids need a teacher or these kids need an aide or whatever it might be. Sometimes the board says, like, yeah, we don't care. Let them start and it'll be kind of we'll approve it after their start date. That's a board decision. All right, so, we want to, again, make sure that if you are consistent with your policies and admin regs in a way so that you can limit the claims of unfair hired practices, right? And so we want to make sure that everyone involved in the panel signs a confidentiality agreement and that it's reviewed. So it's not just a piece of paper that they sign when they walk through the interview, but that the hiring manager or the HR official talks about the importance of this and why they're signing it and what this means, right? Again, that's why I find it so important to give them a little bit of what they can say after, because you're gonna be approached. Anyone who sits on the panel is gonna be approached. All positions should be approved by the designated business and HR department leadership. Okay, there's a section in this report that talks about your need for a structure for approving positions. Okay, so we typically call this a personnel requisition. This is the system that needs to be in place to support position control, budget, like awareness and approval, so that I can't just call from this school right over here and say, hey, I need a new X, Y, and Z, right? Or this person left, can you go ahead and fill it? We need to fly that position. There needs to be an approval process in the form of a personnel requisition. Most districts do this electronically. Again, you probably have a system. Do you have informed people? Well, we'd have to look at your systems, but there are systems in place. Do you have, what's your operating system for like the county? Okay.
It's fiscal management. And then we add digital schools.
Okay. There should be a system in place. You might have to start with paper. We provided a personnel requisition that if an employee leaves the district, the personnel requisition follows this route. And if somebody wants to create a new position, it follows this route, right? But fiscal and HR are signing off on it. And somebody is saying, yes, we need this position. I approve this position and we can fund it. Okay, and here's how we're funding it. All of that information should be on the personnel requisition form before HR applies it. This is like pretty critical in terms of getting your position control cleaned up and getting a system in place to make sure that the positions that you are hiring actually are ones you need, right? So there is a section in the report, and so that's what that is referring to, that business and HR are signing up on this. And it doesn't have to be the assistant superintendents, but somebody in budget is there assigned to say, yes, that bucket of money still has money. I approve, and here's the budget code for this. And then somebody in HR is saying, okay, great. Right? Again, depending on new or replacement. It's imperative that we hire our hiring manager, or train our hiring managers. And that we create a communication plan that includes engagement with our ed partners. Again, use your union leadership, right? Come up with some ideas. Come up with some social media points that they can put on theirs that you know, can go on the, I use CSEA and it was BTA for me. I use both of their social media sites. I asked them, okay, where do people hang out? Right, the community, let's post on their stuff, like just use them as partners in this, because they wanna hire people too, they want more members and they don't want their members to get burnt out because they're covering for some vacancies. Oh my gosh. Thank you. I know that was also a lot, and I could talk about HR for a very long time, but you know, we do a lot of work with districts that are struggling with just recruitment in general and process. Part of that is because HR is so transactional and technical, it demands so high, and the challenges are so big. A lot of districts have asked for this, asked for help in HR. I would say that the personnel requisition so important. Staffing that department, and then setting up some processes that people can be trained on, right? So that your systems are consistent and legally compliant. Once you have that in place, then the district can really focus on creative recruitment, right? But if you don't have the other stuff in place, there's no time to do creative recruitment.
I'm kind of concerned. I think I need to get an idea of what our vacancy rates are then. If there's such a dire need. I'm very familiar with the hiring practices, and I know that our HR department is very important. And for me, it was keeping out of HR jail. So it's good training that we need to ensure that we're doing it the way that it needs to be done. So yeah, if we could get kind of the listings of vacancies and where.
So one of the things that I think, you know, I'd recommend you do, and I know you're already looking at that, is pulling what HR thinks is your vacancies. And then what your position control says is our vacancies, right? And comparing those two.
Reconciliation of both.
Yeah.
Any other questions that you have? Well, we have Dr. Neiman here.
I think that's great information. Yes. And I do believe in that LORs are overdone. They can be full of fluff. And a conversation over the phone, you can actually catch somebody in a stutter as to the information on the background. That's great. Thank you.
You know, one of the things I want to thank the board is, you know, this started with you, right? Saying like, what's going on in human resources, and we had a longer conversation. It's what's happening structurally throughout the entire district, right? So definitely to no one's fault, right? You know, and again, remember the picture that I showed you where it's like arrows going all over the place, and then there's one where arrows are going in the same direction. Okay, that's systems, processes, and procedures. It has that's what starts that all. And so as we've seen tonight, and you know, Dr. Neiman and Danielle, who worked alongside her, kind of did this work, right? It was identifying this is some really good information for us, because it then again gives us like, okay, here's a flashlight, right? It's not a hammer. these are areas that we need to work on. And areas that we need to kind of see what we need to do next, and then begin to work through those, but it just like, Dr. Neiman said, it takes time. It's not gonna happen overnight. A lot of that as well, is, and I know many of you have been leaders in your own kind of industries, is also changing the mindset of people, so it's beliefs, right? And so being able to, for people to understand, hey, we used to do it this way, right? But really, we see through like objective research, this is what really needs to happen. So it definitely is, a longer conversation. I want to thank you for your time and willingness to be here tonight. To kind of, hear from, Dr. Neiman. And like she said, it's not the first conversation, this will be one of many. But, as you kind of walk away today, I'm a processor. So when we have conversations, sometimes I'll kind of like listen and say, and then I'll go back and I'll process. Because the work that we're doing is very complex. And it's not like, just throwing something out there right off the bat. And so then it's really thinking through like, okay, what are the best solutions, right? For our system, for our kids, right, for our community. And so it's hard work. So I want to commend you for your leadership and what you do, and Dr. Neiman and school services. And this has given us a good foundation, to begin to say like a roadmap for what we need to do next.
I want to really thank you for your time and for having me up here. As I said, I wanted to visit corporate after hearing about it. But I have sat in enough of these to know that this presentation is the least important part of all of this, right? It's the work that comes after. And the report can be pretty and it can sit on the shelf. Or you could spend some time really looking at priorities for moving the district forward. And I've seen districts kind of revamp their whole district office after having some thoughtful conversations, having the board kind of spend their dots, that activity, like you have these 3 dots, what would you say are the most important? Cabinet, what would you say are the most important? And then just starting there, right? With how do we even begin to tackle this? Well, the board feels that this is important, cabinet feels that this is important. What can we make work, right? It's the work that comes after this that's the most important. So the fact that you called and asked for help makes me think that you want to make some changes. That's great. But
I definitely think this is something that we would follow. It's just a full amount of information. Yeah, very eye-opening, very eye-opening. And you did such a great job. You made it understand. It's definitely appreciated. It is very eye-opening, and like you said, we definitely need to sit down and prioritize, because if we did have all the money in the world, we'd hire everybody and throw all the resources, obviously. And so we just want the district to understand that this is a priority for us to start looking at what areas we can improve on. And so it's going to be some tests for all of us to go.
Let's say part of that, a big part of that's budget development. And so it's really looking early on and having those conversations. And that's one of the things that, I'm committed to working with our new CBO on, and making sure that we have a process that's codified that, people can say, hey, in this first quarter, this is what we're doing. Second quarter, this is what we're doing, right? Third quarter. So when it comes down to when we have those big meetings where we don't necessarily love in May and June because they're so long because of LCAP and everything else, it's not a surprise, right? Like all along the journey, we've been there, right? That's important.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Motion. Second. Roll call, Mallory. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy. Patty. And I. Meeting's adjourned at 7:29.
Meetings that are like